Hi everyone. It's been a while that I was thinking about making this video about politics, but I was asking myself, am I doing this? Am I not doing this? Okay, I'm doing this. And there are two reasons that made me decide to make this video. First one is because I see and I sense that there are a lot of people who are in transition right now. They have one foot still in the matrix, one foot out, and they're a bit lost. They don't know where to go or where to look. And the second reason is because I've noticed something that is quite rampant in the spiritual community, and that is that in the name of light, in the name of love, we should not look at negative subjects such as politics or geopolitics. And basically it puts us in a state of denial. Because it is true that if we focus on something negative, we make it grow. But to not look at it at all is a state of denial. And everything is interconnected. I mean, politics is not less spiritual than anything else. So what I wanted to point out here is that if you want to acknowledge the shadow on this planet, we have to look at it in the eye and we have to integrate it. And this is why I'm also doing this video today. So there are a lot of things to talk about, and I will do my best to synthesize. So I thought that maybe I would do a video in two parts, and the first part will be dedicated to all these political questions, and the second part will be more about the wider, broader perspective on a spiritual level regarding what is happening right now on this planet. So there are many strategies to maintain the masses asleep. Politics, education, media, the entertainment industry, consumerism, and so on and so forth. But what strikes me the most right now is that there's a total emptiness of ideas on every level of our society. There are no ideas in politics, there's no vision, there's no integrity. Politicians are only puppets playing the game of the circus of politics. And even on a cultural level, we are only recycling old stuff. There are no new creative ideas. Mainstream artists are completely formatted like supermarket products. And at the same time we created reality TV, which is dumbing down our youth, while we are cutting all the budgets linked to education. So we're really basically formatting and controlling people's minds and make them unable to think and to have a critical thinking regarding everything that is served to them. We are in a time of transition right now, and things are changing very rapidly. And the first thing I would like to talk about is the end of the European Union. Now, my father is American, and he used to be a journalist, and in the last years of his career he was working for the American government for a radio called Radio Free Europe, which was a radio that emitted in the Eastern European countries. And I remember when I was little, when I was a kid, he would go, he would cover the European summits, and he would come back with all these gifts, you know, cards, caps or whatnot, with the European flags on it. And so I was, you know, basically in a very pro-European, pro-American environment, and I was raised in that environment most of my life. Until, of course, I had my spiritual awakening. So at that time we thought that the European construction was based on peace, on cooperation, on partnerships between the countries. But what we now know is that the European construction was actually funded by the CIA, through the CIA agents Monet and Schuman. So this is declassified information that is available if you want to look at it. And basically the goal was to create, they wanted to copy the American model onto the European countries. So one of the main reasons was also to create a bloc of countries against USSR, but the US wanted to expand their markets and their political influence to Europe. And they wanted to create the United States of Europe, but the only condition was that it should be always weaker politically and economically, so it was not in competition with the US. And I would also like to remind people that Hitler was actually partly funded by the Americans, by American Wall Street banks and by the Bush family. So really, the European Union was not designed to work And that's why it doesn't work, and it's never going to work. The foundation of the European Union is completely rotten and corrupt. It is run by technocrats that are not elected, that very clearly serve financial and corporate interests, and who actually decide and dictate what the destiny of 28 countries should be. 27 now that the UK is out. And also the European treaties were forced onto the people. I remind you that in 2005 there was a referendum on the constitution in France and in the Netherlands that voted no. But whatever, the Europeans washed their hands over this referendum and they all signed the Treaty of Lisbon a couple of years later. The impoverishment of Europe is directly due to the liberal socio-economic decisions that are made at the European Commission, such as the austerity measures, the free movement of capital, which lead to unemployment and relocations, the dismantling of family agriculture for an industrial agriculture, etc., etc. So this is why people are losing completely interest in politics. It's because whether they vote right or left, they end up with exactly the same thing. And that's because politicians are only pawns that actually apply the social, economic and political agenda that the European Commission has decided. So what happened is that the power was taken away from the people and centralized into this supranational entity, which is the European Commission. And there's nothing more anti-democratic and more dangerous than that. It's almost like we're in a dictatorship, actually. And then they make us believe that we can change Europe, that we can renegotiate the treaties, but that is completely false. We cannot renegotiate the treaties. And why can't we? Because to renegotiate one line in the treaties, we need to have the unanimous agreement of the 27 countries, now that the UK is out, and the 27 people. It's simply impossible. And the other lie that is told about Europe is that Europe is peace. But that is also not true, because the European Union is like the civil aspect of the military entity, which is NATO. And NATO, we know that is actually led by the US, though the headquarters are in Brussels. And we have seen what NATO led us to do, what NATO is doing in the Middle East. So we are bombing countries, we are having a very neo-colonialist attitude towards those countries. We are leaving them in total chaos, and these countries become rampant with terrorism. So really, the US has become, in the last decades, a permanent war machine, and they are doing that to gather all the power and all the resources in those regions, so oil and gas. The EU is a sinking ship. And when we look at what the experts are saying on the subject, for example, the Economy Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz, who is saying that the euro is going to crash this year because of what's happening in Greece and Italy, we can understand that the end is in fact near. But despite that, the media, which we know serve the same interests as the European Commission, which are financial and corporate interests, still are spreading this propaganda about exiting the EU. It's going to be the apocalypse, it's going to be a catastrophe, etc., etc. We have seen this with the Brexit last year. As soon as we get out of this indoctrination and this way of thinking, then they wave the flag of fascism, racism, or conspiracy theory. And I'm going to be very clear about one thing here. The system will not be changed from within. The system will crash and something new will emerge, a new paradigm will emerge. Because that's like saying in a monarchy, for example, that the king is going to cut his own head off to give back the power to the people. It's simply not going to happen. The EU was created to serve financial and corporate interests. It was never created to serve the people, period. I will also recall that the term conspiracy theory was invented in the 60s after the assassination of Kennedy to silence any other theories about his murder. And it has been since then used by the system in a very intelligent way. First, to close all debates about, disturbing questions. Two, to ridicule and ostracize any person that questions and challenges the system. And they use what I call the black sheep policy, which is to actually lead the masses to stigmatize their own fellow citizens when they don't follow the system's propaganda. So that's really a genius invention. I think even George Orwell didn't think about that. Another tactic that is used for mass manipulation is to manipulate through emotion. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all about emotions. I teach people to reconnect with their emotions and allowing their emotions to run through. But when emotion is used to manipulate, then it becomes a catastrophe, because when we are in emotion, there is no discernment and there is no critical thinking. And from there, anything can be passed on onto the people. The European countries must take back their freedom, their sovereignty, and their democracy. And there is another negative aspect in all of this. It's the rise of extremism, racism, and fascism within Europe, which is a direct consequence of all the policies that were applied in the last decades, the rise of unemployment and poverty. Now, everything was done to create this climate of separation and of fear within Europe, and the rise of these extremist parties actually served the system, because it becomes like the big bad wolf that we must fight. And so all the attention and all the focus is on that, and all the political questions of substance are completely overshadowed. I will speak specifically about the case of what's happening in France, because there are very important presidential elections in France in 1 month, and also because I'm French and I live in France. And for example, I would like to talk about the Front National, which is the extremist party here in France, and how it was funded actually in the 80s by the cult called Moon and the Bush family, and not many people know that. So this is a party that was created to maintain the status quo in French politics, because, like I said before, it becomes the big bad wolf that we have to fight, and so all the rest is overshadowed. So while the Front National have open access in the media for the past 30 years, there's someone like François Asselineau who created his party 10 years ago, and who was completely censored in the mainstream media until now, because now he's running for president officially. And I'm not here to tell people who they should vote for, I'm just going to expose really my own personal opinion about him. So like most people, I discovered him on the net, on YouTube, through his videos and his very insightful conferences, and I immediately felt that this guy was in the light and in his heart. He is not serving his ego, he is serving the collective of his country, and he has very rare qualities in politics, which are integrity and wisdom. And for the sake of this video, because I knew I was going to talk about him, I actually attended his meeting last night, where there were over 1,000 people, very enthusiastic and packed with young people, which really shows that there's nothing old-fashioned about saying that we should get out of the European Union, because he's for the Frexit. On the contrary, it's the future. Among his other propositions, he wants to renationalize all major public services, which is a French tradition, and right now they are being sold to private entities. He wants to have public social security for all and write it down in the constitution, which is also a French tradition. He would like to go back to family agriculture, organic agriculture, and free of GMOs. He would like to have a referendum on the nuclear energy. And he would like to reopen partnerships and relationships with international countries. So because of that, because he's the only candidate in this election that wants to get out of the EU, out of NATO, and out of the Euro, he is going to be the man to knock out during this campaign. And it has already started. So basically they are saying that he's a conspiracy theorist, they are saying that he's a guru. They are attacking him on his looks, which is quite relevant on the fact that they don't have any arguments against him. I would also like to speak briefly about what journalism has become nowadays. As I've just mentioned, Asselineau is being attacked by journalists, and they're accusing him of being a conspiracy theorist because he says that the EU was funded by the CIA, and also because the Dalai Lama was funded by the CIA. This is all declassified information that was also taken by the press, so there were articles about that. So this shows how journalists are not even doing what a journalist should be doing, that is fact-checking. That's like the essential work of a journalist, is to do that. 10 years ago I did a master's degree in journalism, so I really saw how journalists are being trained, and I was completely outraged by that. That's why I finished my year, but I didn't continue. What I saw is that journalists are indoctrinated, they are brainwashed, they are told not to think for themselves, not to have critical thinking. And basically, all information comes from press agencies that are owned by corporate interests or financial interests. And they say, this is the truth, now you can spread that. But don't question it, do not question it. And this is why journalists have become instruments of propaganda. Nowadays it's the whistleblowers such as WikiLeaks or Snowden that are doing the job that journalists should be doing. And they are treated like criminals. So really, journalists, for me, is a watchdog of democracy. It's not a lapdog of the billionaires that have the social, economical and political control over our society. I have lost all interest in politics for the last 10 years, but this year, for the first time of my life, I am going to vote with a real conviction. So this is the end of the first part of this video, so I invite you to watch the second part.